So as many of you know, one of my big projects this year has been to learn a new instrument, and it's now been 3 months. I started learning the touch guitar in mid-January, so we're now a quarter of the way through the year. And a lot has happened since my last update, which was the 1-month update, so a lot to catch up on here. So there's kind of 2 main areas I want to look at today, and one is the technical side of things, the kind of exercises and fretboard knowledge that I've been building, and then the other side is, of course, the musical side, and that's where I've made the most progress. A lot to talk about there as well. So we left off in the last update talking about the C major scale, and that was kind of like the last thing that I had learned during the first month. And it seems rather simple on the surface, and musically it is very simple, so it might be surprising that it took me a whole month to learn that, but there's a lot that goes into learning that exercise on this instrument that makes it a lot harder than it seems. Now, what I've been doing in the last couple of months is expanding upon this and learning to play other things within this bracket, meaning arpeggios, for example. And so we want to use the same fingering that we would use for the scale and apply that to the arpeggios. For example, C, D, E, this note E in this position, I'm always going to play with the right hand and the first finger. F is always going to be here with this finger, G with this finger. So if I mentally overlay this fingering pattern for the whole scale over these 3 strings, that will tell me automatically which finger I should use to play the arpeggios. When you're out in the wild actually playing music, you're allowed to use any fingering. But as a learning tool, this is good to limit ourselves to one specific finger per note because it allows us to develop a really strong relationship between certain fingers and certain sounds. So we would then learn to play all of the triads that exist within the C major scale. So that's the C major triad. We have D minor. We have E minor. F, and so on. So we want to go through all of the triads using the fingering from the C major scale that we played earlier. And so a good exercise to practice this is to alternate between playing the scale and playing an arpeggio. And then you would go back down the scale and then do a different triad coming up. And since you're always alternating between the scale and the arpeggio, it kind of reminds you of the fingering that you're supposed to use for the arpeggio. So on the way down the scale, you kind of notice, okay, I played the G with this finger, so I need to play it with that finger when I do the arpeggios on the way up. So that's the concept of that exercise. That's called the round of 7. So moving on, another aspect I've been learning about is playing chords. This is one of the most fun things for me to do on this instrument so far. Just learning where the different chords are and having fun with that. So this is something I started exploring just 2 notes at a time. So instead of a full triad, just doing, I guess that would be tenths, which are basically thirds, but just an octave up. Then it's really easy to add the 5th in between. The 5th interval is really easy on this instrument because it's tuned in 5ths. So the 5th will always be right above the root on the same fret. Then if I just go up my scale, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and then this one's a little weird. This is the B diminished. And then we finally reach C again at the top. One exercise I like to do is to go through all of the chords in a particular scale, like C major, and try and play them within a limited space on the fretboard, say like 4 or 5 frets, something like that. So you could play C, D minor, and then instead of going up here for E minor, let's find one that's closer. So maybe here, and then F, we could play like this, G, A minor, and then B diminished. So lots to explore there. Chords have been one of the most fun aspects for me to explore on this instrument. Now, I want to get to the musical side of things. We've been talking mostly about technique, but it's in the musical realm that I've made the most progress in the last 2 months. So let me show you something cool. I've got a pedal set up here where I can set up a drone, then I can loop that, and then I can improvise over that. So I guess I chose G, that's my drone here. And here I can just explore. This is so much fun to have like all these different sounds available. As opposed to playing by yourself with no effects. Like, this is a lot of fun to have the effects here, because now it starts to sound like music. So that's what I've been working with on the improv side of things, and I want to introduce you to one more concept before we wrap up this video. And now we're going to return to kind of the technical side of things. And I want to show you one of the craziest exercises that I have ever learned how to play. So here we go. So this is the grandfather exercise. So if you remember, Markus Reuter has this family of exercises, the mother, the daughter, the son. You kind of got all of these different characters here. And the grandfather is a pretty quirky exercise. So what on earth was going on here? First of all, let's look at what the purpose of this is. Why should we practice this? So the whole point is to learn how to hold certain notes down while playing other notes. So for example, we hold down the pinky, and then we want to be free to play anything with the remaining 7 fingers. So this is both a physical exercise as well as an ear training exercise. So we want to physically be able to play any combination of notes basically within this sort of position. We also want to be able to hear any of these intervals, ideally. So how do we arrive at that goal? Well, one way you could do it that would be easier to explain and demonstrate here would be just to play chromatic scales. And we could hold down one note at a time. So we could hold down the first note, just bump that down to the next string, and play the remaining 7 notes with the other fingers. And then we could hold a different note, and then play the remaining 7 fingers wherever they are. That's one way you could approach it. But ideally, we would also like an exercise that kind of bounces the melody back and forth between the hands, because not every melody is just going to be so literal down the scale like this. So one way we might approach that is to play the same chromatic scale but alternate between the hands, 1 note per hand. So instead of, we play right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Or maybe we play 2 notes per hand. But ideally, we would like a mix of both, because we want to cover as many possibilities as we can with this one exercise. And so it turns out one of the best things to use is a paradiddle. So we can take drum rudiments or stickings and apply them to the guitar. So if we play a paradiddle, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, and then introduce the other fingers, and we're always going to descend. Within a paradiddle pattern, this is what it looks like. So right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. So that's step one. But now we want to hold down one note at a time. Right, left, right, right, left, left. The final tweak we want to make to this exercise, to make it kind of the ultimate exercise, is that we want to alternate which hand we're holding the notes down with, because this is a really physically demanding thing to do, to hold a note down with one hand and play all this other stuff. So ideally, we don't want to just always hold down with the right hand, because we're going to get really tired, and if we do it too much, we might injure ourselves. So we want to alternate between the right and the left hand for the sustained notes. So we do one set of paradiddles, right, left, 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 and then left, right, right, right. Basically, the whole rudiment is right, left, left, then left, right, right. And then the only other thing we have to do is go through all of the different starting points. So instead of holding down the pinkies, we can hold down the ring fingers, the third fingers. And then hold down the middle finger. Now I realize it's a very complicated exercise, and you might say, like, is this just complex for the sake of complexity? Like, what's the application of this? Where am I actually going to use this? And that's kind of how I reacted when Markus first showed me this exercise. I had a lot of resistance actually to learning this exercise at the beginning for a number of different reasons. I mean, first of all, it's just a very weird sound, which is subjective, but to my ears it was very strange. It just sounded like random notes. And don't get me wrong, I do like weird harmony, and I like dissonance, but I also like consonance. I like tension and release. I think that's what it is. And so when there's just constant tension and no release, it actually makes me like physically uncomfortable. Now, it turns out that once I learned the melodies, it actually helped a lot. And in fact, I found a lot of really, really useful bits within these patterns. So what first sounded like random notes to me, I realized are actually like pieces of songs that I know or melodies that I know. So for example, this first variation, I actually noticed, wait, there's a familiar piece in that. Like, what is that? And then I realized it's this. Right? So there's like a little chunk of Inspector Gadget contained within this exercise. This part. Another example is, I guess, the fourth variation of this, which would be this. That's actually the beginning of the James Bond melody. Right there. Right? So I started to realize that there's actually a lot of really useful melodic bits in this seemingly random exercise. So you can really get a lot just by playing this one exercise. It's so densely packed with information. So I definitely had some resistance to this in the beginning, not only because the sound was so weird, but also because it's really hard to play. Physically, it's a really demanding challenge. You have these like stretches that you've got to do, which on the first day seemed impossible. Like my hands can't stretch. And so playing this interval right now is like now quite comfortable. Like the body just learned. It just figured it out. The only real conscious tip, which I actually do think was helpful, was just Markus mentioned to me that I'm gonna have to just search around and like rotate my hand maybe to find the position that's comfortable, which might seem obvious to all of you that already play guitar and bass, but as a drummer learning this instrument, that's new to me. So it's helpful for me to kind of have all the steps laid out, even if they seem obvious. And that helped me. The rest took care of itself on its own, which is a mind-blowing thing that I still can't explain, but it worked. So that's where I'm at after 3 months. As always, you can check out all of the lessons that I'm doing with Markus on his channel. So a lot more detail over there if you want to check that out, which I definitely recommend you do. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.